orientation. This is the version of yesterday's orientation, yesterday being Saturday the 26th of September 2015. This is the sort of secondary follow-up version of yesterday's in-person orientation, and this is for anyone who wasn't able to make it yesterday or anyone who might just want a little bit of a refresher. So we are going to go through, and I'm looking for my screen sharing option right now. We're going to go through and show you some of what we shared with our volunteers as well as maker exhibitors yesterday. So we are going to go ahead and share this screen with you. So let's see if we can get in here and make this work. Okay, I will start actually by showing you this. So this is a really nice brochure that will be printed up and handed out to attendees and also exhibitors and volunteers at the fair. And the first thing I want to start off by talking about are the two different check-in areas for volunteers as well as maker exhibitors. So if you are a volunteer, you will check in at the beginning of your shift in the fleet, the Reuben H. fleet. And let's show you an example of where that is. So if you're coming along Park Boulevard here, you can turn in. This is the fleet, and of course this is the B. Everson fountain that's out here just to sort of orient you, and the Natural History Museum over here. So you will come in to this back parking lot if you are a volunteer at the beginning of your shift. Please do this before anything else. You'll check in by entering the fleet through this back parking lot area. If you're there early in the morning, you will most likely have no problem with parking in these parking lots. If you're there a little bit later, we recommend that you go over to what's called Inspiration Point. This is the Veterans Museum over here, also down along Park Boulevard, and there's a lot of parking over here, and there's a really great shuttle that runs every few minutes between the two places. So volunteers check in to what's called the Community Forum at the Reuben H. Fleet. Do that at the beginning of your shift. And then as for exhibitors, maker exhibitors, you will come also along Park Boulevard and pull in along President's Way, and you'll check into what's called the Federal Lawn, the Federal parking lot. So if we look back here, that's this parking lot, just to orient us. This is air and space over here, and that Federal parking lot, if you can hopefully see where my cursor is circling right now, that Federal parking lot is this area down here. I'll zoom in and sort of show you that here on Google Maps. So here's Air and Space Museum, and then over here, this is the parking lot as a maker exhibitor that you will pull into, and that is important that it's between 7 and 9 a.m. We really, really recommend coming in earlier as opposed to later, especially if you have a lot to set up, just because when 10 o'clock hits, all of the attendees will be in the fair and things will be ready to go. So if you are a maker exhibitor, you come to this Federal parking lot over here to the southeast of Air and Space Museum, and I'll zoom back out so you can see where that is. This is Park Boulevard running along here. So this is your parking lot. So we'll go over a little bit about, we'll cover what happens when you arrive, both for the exhibitors as well as the volunteers. So let's assume it's morning, it's our morning shift, and we have maker exhibitors as well as volunteers, both here in this Federal parking lot, getting ready to assist with what's going on. And we are, let's see if we can still see this. Yeah. So the maker exhibitors will pull in. They'll be met in a greeting or in a loading area by the volunteers. There will be two types of volunteers on staff at that point. One will be a volunteer who meets them and gives the exhibitor their paperwork. We've asked all of the exhibitors to come with their exhibitor agreements signed. The exhibitors will present their exhibitor agreements to the volunteers. The volunteers will in turn give you a wristband, and that wristband, of course, is your ticket to entry. Then you will, depending on your situation, if you're an exhibitor who's working solo, you will be able to pull your car in. You'll be given a label that will have a to and from field on it, and you'll be given a label and a Sharpie, and you'll be asked to put to your booth number and from your phone number. That way, when you unload your stuff kind of on that curbside unloading area, we'll have volunteers there to help you, and we'll ask that you make sure to identify your stuff just so that we know who it belongs to. Then you're going to be asked to go and park your car, and we'll give you a map. If you're a maker exhibitor, we'll give you a map at that point that tells you exactly where you're going to be exhibiting and the best place to park your car in relation to that. Now remember, we will have the trolley running starting at 7:30, or excuse me, the tram running at 7:30, so that you will have help with parking, so not to worry. So let's cover that one more time. We'll look at this area again on our map. Both the Saturday morning shift volunteers, they'll check in at the fleet, but then we'll be primarily stationed in these areas. We'll be stationed down here in the federal parking lot, where all maker exhibitors will first check in between 7 and 9 a.m. And like I said, please come early. The volunteer staff at that time is in charge of helping those folks become oriented to where they need to go and helping them unload. Now there are 3 other primary areas that once you first stop in the federal federal parking lot and check in, we may direct you to. One of them, if you can again kind of follow my cursor here, I know it's a little bit hard to see on the screen. One of them is the primary central plaza area up here, up in the middle of the park. So this is the area in front of the San Diego Art Museum. It has sort of a smaller fountain in the middle of it. It has a sort of roundabout area and a big open plaza area. That is one of these areas that people will be able to pull into. And again, we're going to have this sort of drive-through line similar to the curbside loading at an airport or something like that. And we'll have a team of volunteers that is here helping people helping exhibitors unload their stuff. So exhibitors always check in first at the federal lawn, and then they'll be directed to either a volunteer team up here in the plaza or a volunteer team, again, I hope you can see my cursor here, volunteer team over here at the NAT. So if you're familiar with this huge tree, this sort of amazing ancient tree that lives behind the NAT Museum, the Natural History Museum, there's a smaller sort of cul-de-sac street here that exhibitors will be able to pull into and unload if they're in the NAT or some of these areas. And then the third area that exhibitors may be directed to meet volunteers and unload is what we're calling the South parking lot. So this is the parking lot, again, hopefully you can see where my cursor is down here, the parking lot down by Air and Space Museum. So in front of Air and Space Museum and the Automotive Museum, we'll have a large parking lot area that will be sectioned off. That's where the battle pond will be, the battleship battle pond. And there'll be a lot of exhibits related to maker spaces and other things down here. So this south area, this central plaza, and this area by the NAT, up by this sort of ancient tree, are the 3 areas, points of entry, where after you've checked in as an exhibitor to the federal parking lot, you'll be directed to go and do a drop-off and connect with your volunteer team that's going to be helping you. And so for the volunteers, that also gives you an idea of the 3 primary areas that volunteers will be needed. Now, just to, kick the horse here a little bit, volunteers, just as a reminder, please check in at the fleet at the beginning of your shift. Okay, so let's see. We will go back to our Google map here a little bit, just to kind of replay that a little bit so that we are sure that that map is telling the story the way that we hope it will. I know that sometimes the satellite view is a little bit easier to see things. So one more time, this is our plaza area, and this is an area where we will be having a lot of exhibits, some of our spectaculars, some of the things like the robot resurrection and other large items, but we'll also be having some booths out here. And so this is an area where we will need what we're calling our outdoor volunteers. So these are shifts that might primarily be midday, people who are happy to walk around and sort of experience the fair, be a part of the fair, interact with exhibitors as well as attendees, and really just be sort of general helpers during the time of the fair. Now, if we come down the Prado, there will be things running down the Prado. There'll be cupcake cars and other things sort of zooming along this area. If we come over here to this fountain here over by the Fleet, between the Fleet and the Nat, this is another area where we'll have spectaculars. The electric giraffe will be there, and there will also be some booths there. So this is another area just to understand the layout of things, where we will also need outdoor volunteers. Now for our maker exhibitors, many of you will be in these museums. We will also be needing volunteer counterparts to be part of these museums as well, so that we have teams inside of these different museums ready to just sort of help everyone who's exhibiting there when needed, if needed. Okay, and then if we look back down here, we're going to have a trolley in addition to the parking tram. We're going to have a tram that takes people from between the south lot and this upper part of the museum, of where the Prado and the Plaza and the fountain are. So down here, just one more time to cover this, this is where the Air and Space Museum is, Hall of Champions Automotive Museum. This parking lot here is what's going to be taken over to be the makerspace area, focusing on education and community spaces related to making, as well as the huge battle pond area, which is going to be a lot of fun. And then this lawn over here, if you can see this, just behind the Hall of Champions, this area is going to be the drone fly cage, and I believe it's now called the Drone Fight Club is going to be doing their thing there, as well as some other large outdoor exhibits. So once again, just to give you an idea. So all of the areas I just mentioned will have both exhibitors and also volunteers in them. So for our volunteers, it's good to think about whether you'd prefer to be indoors, maybe in a museum, or whether you like being outdoors, walking around, having a lot of sort of crowd interaction, really being a part of the activity of the fair. As for both exhibitors and makers, as we mentioned, the morning will have the easiest parking, obviously. For volunteers who are coming later in the day, you will still be able to park over here at the inspiration point where this huge parking lot is and jump on that tram that runs every few minutes. So it won't be too bad. Okay, so let's see what is up next. Let's go back here and keep thinking this through. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about what's going to be happening during the day of all these areas that will be activated. You can see the blue numbers related to different areas of activity here. So when Sunday evening comes along, or actually let's talk about Saturday evening first. When Saturday evening comes along, some of the folks who have outdoor canopy exhibit areas may want to take some of their items with them. There will be security overnight, but some of you may have things like computers, etc., that you just don't feel comfortable leaving out. So some folks will be taking things home with them. In the evening, after 6 p.m. is a time when we can start to work on things like that. And again, by between 6 and 7, the traffic will die down, and we'll be able to help you get those things, get to your car and get those things out. Now on Sunday evening, we're going to be basically running this procedure of check-in and load-in kind of in reverse. So where we started on Saturday morning with this really important, 7 a.m. start time for our exhibitors, and actually 6 a.m. start time for our volunteers. We run through on Saturday morning this important role of the exhibitors coming in and the volunteers interacting with them, the volunteers giving you your paperwork, then showing you how to get to your space. We'll be doing something sort of similar to that on Sunday evening, but kind of in reverse, where the volunteers will be working with the exhibitors to break down the exhibits and again create these sort of traffic flow areas where people can pull in, collect their items, and be on their way. So we'll be doing that on Sunday evenings. Okay, so let's go back to our Hangout now. All right, so let's see. I think I'll jump off of that again, just so that you can see that I'm a human. Hello. So I think it's important to pause and just thank everybody because, you know, Maker Faire is just such an extraordinary event. The first Maker Faire, of course, was the Mini Maker Faire in 2013, and the team of folks that represent the Makers Guild here in San Diego, which is really made up of a lot of volunteers who came together around the first Maker Faire in San Diego, is also a volunteer team and a group of people who are extremely dedicated, just like you are, to the Maker movement. And so we just want you to know how much we appreciate you and, you know, how excited we are to see this happening, because it has been over a year in process to make this next event happen. And having Balboa Park as the area that is, you know, such a representative, sort of iconic space for San Diego, it's so important and exciting that we have this as a place to represent the Maker movement in San Diego. So thank you, first and foremost, for being a part of it. I want to make sure I say that. Okay, so also, thinking about paperwork, we mentioned these papers that we want you to show up with. If you're a volunteer, we want you to show up with your waiver. If you don't have it and you're thinking to yourself, well, I couldn't come in person yesterday, don't stress, we'll have those on hand for you. We just need you to sign that, basically, you know, general good behavior waiver, of course, the sort of general liability stuff, so that we can hand you your wristband. And then for Maker exhibitors, we're going to ask that you make sure that you either come with or sign on the spot your Maker exhibitor agreement, which again, you know, covers similar topics. So those are required to give you your wristbands in order to enter. Now I will post, I'll see, actually I'm not all that familiar, I've never used Hangouts on air before, but I'll figure out a way to post some of these important links that you might need, including if you have questions. So if you are a day of volunteer and you have any questions, you can email me. I'm volunteers plural at sdmakerfair.org. If you have questions about things like how many tickets can I get for my booth, I might have a school situation where I have students rotating through the day or some sort of special circumstance like that, you can email sdmakerfair@gmail.com. That's another great place to go. If by chance you're watching this video but you're actually a hands-on volunteer, that's okay, that's fine. All this information pertains to, we'll direct you to UN Tran, however, who is your point of contact. And likewise, if you are a guest services volunteer who's actually working with Balboa Park to man the ticketing portion of the fair, I will put up some links to direct you to the correct person who is your point person for that. So we'll make sure that we get everybody sorted out. So one more time, everybody please, few basic general things, but they deserve being said again. Please wear comfortable shoes, please bring water, please bring snacks, sunscreen, hats, anything that you need to make sure that you are comfortable and taken care of. Please let us know if you have certain requirements, especially our volunteers, if you would prefer to be indoors and need to sit down, or if you prefer to be outdoors and you're happy moving around, let us know. That's really great. Also for our volunteers who will be coming, as well as our Maker exhibitors, and especially our Maker exhibitors, please be sure you bring what you need to build your exhibit. If you need, you know, drills and hammers and work gloves and safety goggles, please make sure you bring those with you. We will have things on hand, but we can't promise that we'll have everything that you need. So please be sure you as an exhibitor or as a maker, you and your team bring what you need to put your exhibit together. We'll be there to help you, but ultimately we need you to bring what you need. Also, exhibitor makers, please bring dollies and carts that you can push, things to help you move your things, your items from your car out to your space. Again, we have these on hand, but there will be a lot of activity and a lot of people, and we can't promise that we'll have everything right when you need it. So please, please bring that stuff. If you, let's see, if you are a volunteer, please also, bring what you need to be comfortable. If you're a volunteer, also please be sure to wear closed-toed shoes. And I know it's going to be warm, but try to stay covered in terms of pants. This is all just sort of general, should something fall, we want you to have less exposure, be more covered up. So closed-toed shoes especially, and wear comfy ones. You will, as that volunteer, you will have sort of a dedicated lounge space, your check-in space that you come to in the morning, which is the community forum at the Fleet Science Center. That space is yours throughout the day. So if you have things you need to leave there, if you have food you need to store there, anything like that, you will have that during the day. It will also be managed, so it will be safe. And so you will have a place also when you need to take a break or come back, you can utilize that space there as well. So we'll make sure that you have a place to break. There will be food. We've been asked this a few times. There will be food trucks coming on to site to make sure that we have enough food for everybody who's attending the fair. So don't worry, we will make sure people have food options outside of the places that are already there at the Balboa Park. If you have any other questions or there's anything that we haven't covered that you need to know about, please let us know. Again, for volunteer contacts, my email is volunteers, plural, at sdmakerfair.org. And remember, fair is spelled with an E in this case. I'm sure you already know that. And feel free to ask me questions about those things. Or if you're not sure where to go to, you can also email me, and I'll do my best to direct you in the right place. Okay, so hopefully that gives you the general overview that you need to know. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I haven't included in here. I'm sure there's something. I'll put some posts up at the end just in case there's other things that I need to say that I failed to remember. But that should give you an overview of sort of some of the primary things. Yes, here's another thing we'd love to ask you to help us with. Please help get the word out in the final days before the fair. Sending, putting a post on Facebook or making a tweet about your great exhibit and using the hashtag SDMakerFair is really, really appreciated. Sending an email to invite friends or family or colleagues is really great. This is, an event that really is grown from a grassroots community and a love of making. So we ultimately do ask for your help in getting the word out there. So thank you. Thank you again for being a part of the fair. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a really huge and amazing event. Okay, so with that, I bid you adieu. Thanks so much, and we'll see you very soon. All right, take care. Katie out.